Uninspiring Econobox fuel crisis. 3 things that describe the auto industry in the 80s. However, one company had a dream of a world where Econoboxes are just as exciting as sports cars. That company was Honda, and with that dream, they created the Honda CRX.
Surprise!
First generation CRX began production in 1983. It wasn't until 1985, when the SI trim came out, that the CRX was cemented as a performance econobox. With the introduction of the SI in 85 came an improvement to most of the areas that were lacking of the first generation CRX. This included larger rims and slightly better suspension components, which really helped stick this car to the road. The CRX was everything you could ask for out of a vehicle during the fuel crisis. It's cheap, it's quick, it's fuel efficient. These things even got nearly 50 miles per gallon, which was pretty crazy during a time where automakers like Chevy were making vehicles with only 124 horsepower that were only getting 10 miles per gallon. And with the introduction of the second generation of the Honda CRX, beginning in 1988, came even more improvements. Some of these improvements included double wishbone suspension on all 4 corners, rear disc brakes for the 90-91 SI model years, and a jump in horsepower from 92 horsepower to 108, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you take into consideration the fact that these cars weighed a little bit over 2,000 pounds, that's huge. And what really makes the CRX great is the fact that you can take the long, scenic way home and still have only used 2 gallons of gas. And with the amazing handling characteristics and lightweight chassis, you might just be able to keep up with the Nissan Altima. And with this timeless, curvy yet boxy 80s styling, it's beautiful. What is there not to love about a Honda CRX? And this is all just to say that I have a CRX that I plan on restoring. Hi, I'm Mason, and this is Mason Builds Cars and Stuff. This is my dad's 1991 Honda CRX, and I will, theoretically, be restoring it. And here's where I start, stripping down a donor shell. My plan with this shell is to cut off every single good panel that I can and use it as a patch panel for my dad's. While my dad's doesn't have any rust that's too severe, it does have a couple areas that need to be addressed, like the A-pillar and both rear quarter panels. What I really like about using a shell like this, instead of trying to measure and cut out my own patch panels from raw sheet metal, is that everything's identical. All I have to do is measure what section of a certain panel I need, come to the donor car, cut it out, and then slap it right onto the other car. And it's also really great because I know that this car would definitely be being scrapped otherwise, so it's really great to give it a chance to at least be useful. To get things kicked off, I started by removing all the spare parts from the interior. The spare parts were majority interior pieces. There are only a few parts of note, like a door card, gauge cluster bezel, and a couple of pieces that go to the dash. While there were a handful of interior pieces that were in pretty good shape, unfortunately, the majority of the spare parts that came in this car were damaged. Many of them were cracked, scratched, or even had holes in them. Most disappointingly, the gauge cluster bezel is pretty much junk. I did also find a ECU. Unfortunately, it was painted over and I could not see a serial number, and the screws on the top of it were stripped out, so I will look into this later. With all these loose pieces now out of the car, it gives me a lot more room to work inside of it. However, it does have the inverse effect of now it's a little cluttered around the car. So I'm going to get all these moved over elsewhere so I'll have a good working space. With all of these pieces out of the way, I now have enough room to work around the car. I can start to remove the first obstacle in the way, which is the HVAC system. So the first thing I notice before even diving in and touching anything is that someone has been in here before, and they have stripped stuff out already. So I'm gonna get cracking. All things considered, the dash in a CRX actually isn't too hard to remove. The most difficult part of it is there's a wiring harness loom that runs along the back of the dash that's screwed in for the radio and the gauge cluster. And you really kind of have to like twist your body and contort to get in there to get it out, but other than that, it's pretty easy. What's really nice about removing the HVAC assembly from a CRX is it's really easy to take out. There's about 15 bolts holding the whole thing in, and there's only about 5 connectors between the blower motor, evaporator, and the heater core, making it actually a pretty quick job. I think that's actually just nice. Boom. Just gonna slide this one out. Also just slide right out. Perfect. Oh man, I really don't mess with any of the fuel stuff. Come. Boom. Ah, there we go. And so that is the heater core out. And with the whole HVAC assembly out, that leaves nothing but the firewall installation, carpet, and seats to remove. After I get all the firewall installation out, I have full access to all the wiring harnesses I need to get to inside the cabin. And once I get those pulled, I'll be able to push this thing outside and get ready for the next car. Only 8 bolts later, and the interior is looking way more spacious already. How goes it? Unfortunately, I ended up not having the correct Torx bit for this, so I had to run to the store. And with the correct one in hand, I could get started. Oh! Okay. I have no idea if that just... I was a little worried I'd snapped that bolt, but it ended up coming out alright. The second one I was a little more worried about because it was already stripped out. Ironically, this one actually came out easier than the other did. And with those 2 bolts out, all I had to do is pop this panel up, remove the e-brake trim cover, and then do the same to the other side, and the carpet was out. Forward, and there we have it. I can't stop with gloves on. And just like that, it's all out. The last thing I gotta do is I just gotta pull out the firewall insulation, and then pull the last couple of connectors there through the firewall and get all disconnected in the engine bay, and I should be good up front, and I should be able to put the steering column back up, and I should be done up here for now, and then I'll move on to all of the wiring in the back. So originally I was kind of hoping that this would be in decent shape so I could save it to have as a spare for when I do the other car, but oh, it's all damp and moldy, and it's been so waterlogged that it's just falling apart. So I'm not even gonna bother taking it out the right way. After a little bit of hacking and slashing, I got it all bagged up and thrown out. So this gasket right here has been heated and cooled and whatever so many times that it is basically stuck to the car. No matter how much I'm prying, I cannot get it out. So I have a solution to this. Alright, screw it. There we go. Boom. With that now out of the way, all I had to do was snip the clips that were holding the wiring harness to the firewall and pull one last loom through the firewall, and the whole thing came right out. This harness was actually in pretty good shape, except for one of the connectors for the horn was cracked and the wires to it were frayed. They also did the big no-no, which is using wire nuts to connect wires on a car.
In any case, if you use wire nuts to connect wires in your car, I will come to your house in the middle of the night and slap the shit out of you.
And now, with that out, we're all done with the firewall, and we can move to the back of the cabin. So I was just lifting open the hatch, and I guess that it wasn't, the hinges aren't bolted on. Oh, the hinge actually just broke. Wow, that's crazy. Okay, so the hinge just broke on that side. So anyway, now over here on this side, this is happening, which isn't too good. Well, that was neat. Oh, God. Oh, it's as you can see, the hinge just completely snapped off right there where it connects to the body. With all the harnesses now out of the way, I'm pretty much done with this car until it's time to cut it up. Now all I gotta do is put the steering column back up and push it outside and get ready for the next one. The steering column support did need a little extra bit of persuasion, but I was able to get it back in pretty easily. Alright, well, the steering column's back up. It's a little wobbly because I haven't fully tightened in, but it doesn't matter because this car isn't really going anywhere other than 5 feet on the driveway. So I'm not too worried about anything coming loose because it's not going to be under a lot of vibration or force. Also, when I was in there, just on this bad boy, spare 10 mil, and it's 3/8, which I can really use because my other 3/8 10 mil is a little occupied at the moment. So that's a win. Put the hatch back on and the windshield back in place, and this thing is good to be pushed outside. Well, I was originally planning on just getting this thing pushed outside right away. While I was pushing it around, I got a call from my buddy Mark saying that he's having a pretty bad misfire with his car, and he needed to put new plugs and coils in. And it was still pretty cold out, and I wouldn't have enough room for him to be able to maneuver around my driveway if I was to push this car out. So I just decided on pushing it back as far as I could so he could get his car partially pulled in, and we got to work. Yeah, just perfect. And then this comes out. Dang it, do you guys need a cabin air filter?
No, I didn't.
Whole thing. Now this is how his plugs are supposed to look, all nice, new, and shiny. Now this is what his look like. All caked in oil and gunked up, no wonder why he was having misfire. Some of them are also pretty seized up in the cylinders, and I was a little worried I was going to pull the threads out with them. After we got all the old plugs out, we put brand new plugs in, torqued them to spec, and then got the new coil packs in, and it's looking pretty good. While we're also already in here, we ran to the store real quick and got a new cabin air filter, because this is what his old one looked like, and this is what they're supposed to look like, so he was definitely due for a fresh one.
Sounds better.
We got everything reinstalled, got it started back up, and pulled it out, and it was actually sounding better than it ever had. Although, judging by the condition the plugs were in, he will definitely be needing a new valve cover gasket in the near future. After that was done, the next step was to get the brakes on the black CRX freed up so I could get it pulled over to the canopy, so that when the time comes, I'll be able to just push it right in there when I'm ready to work on it. The first obstacle to getting the brakes freed up was this locking bolt for the center cap for the rims, which was unfortunately stripped out, so I had to drill it out. Little JB Weld and IloveUIhateU. With that out of the way, the next hurdle to get over was the locking lug nuts that I unfortunately lost the key to 5 years ago. So I got these neat little spiral hammer-on sockets that you just put on the locking lug nut, hammer it on, and then you can just use a 1/2-inch ratchet to get it right off. Understandably, after sitting for so long, these were a little stuck on, so I had to deploy some extra help. And just like that, it was off. This was the probably 5th thing I tried to get these locking lug nuts off, and this one worked the best. With that off, all I had to do next was loosen up the lug nuts. Get it jacked up. And get the tire off and get it stuck under the car so if the jack fails again, it won't crush my foot this time. And hammer on the brakes. This drum came off way easier than I was expecting. The brake drum hardware looked as if it was replaced right before the car was parked, which is pretty impressive considering this car's been parked for 30 years. The wheel bearing was a little seized up, but that's to be expected. After that, all I had to do was put everything back together, and then I had to do the same to the other side. Evidently, this side is how I was expecting the other side to be, way more stuck on, and this brake drum assembly was really crusty. Now this is what I'm really expecting out of a 30-year-old car. The frame around it though actually looks pretty good. The trailing arms don't have any rust, and the underbody doesn't look to have any rust either. I actually wasn't able to fit a jack under the front of the car, and I didn't really feel like pumping up the tires just to be able to fit the jack under, and I got 2 of the brakes freed up, so that's 50%, and I'm pretty sure it's passing grade, so that should be good enough. The next day I got the tires all pumped up, and after they're all nice and plump, we were good to go. The next step was to get my Superior towing rig started up and pulled around, and put into place to get it to work.
My car already was struggling a little bit.
I got both cars hooked together with some cheap tow chain. And just like that, for the first time in nearly 25 years, this CRX has moved from where it was once sat to rot.
It too much.
Other than nearly sending us up on a collision course for a tree, this went surprisingly well. Considering how icy and slushy the driveway was, I was really impressed with how well my Civic handled it, with only maybe 1 or 2 occasions where it actually ended up losing traction.
Can I go to that side? Yeah.
Originally when I added in these sensors for the license plates, I didn't realize that you could automatically add tracking blurs. I probably spent about an hour manually going through and keyframing every single frame with the blur to blur out the license plates, just to then redo it in maybe 5 minutes with the auto tracking feature. After keyframing it all manually, I had even made a joke about how I automatically did it, because I didn't realize you could automatically do it, and I didn't need to keyframe every single frame of me pulling this other car. And now, here it is. And it's actually in a little better shape than I originally thought it was. Some of its more notable features are the factory fog lights, unmolested engine bay, a couple of period-correct, tasteful bolt-ons, and of course, I think the best feature of the engine bay, factory AC. Now for the bad, it does have some rear quarter rust. Driver's side A-pillar also has a rust hole in it. Passenger side door sill has a rust hole in it. It does also have some rust bubbles forming around the gas door. And other than a lot of mold and chipmunk droppings, the interior is actually in pretty good shape with some pretty nice solid seats. And other than the dirt and grime, this is the cleanest, second most complete CRX interior I've ever seen in person. I think the real shining star of the interior is the uncracked climate control. And here's where it'll sit for the next couple of months until I have the time to get around to it, because the semester starts tomorrow and this app also gets banned on Sunday. So I gotta get to work on editing, and I won't have much time to mess around with this. So I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me something you didn't like.